Hey, welcome to this overview for the Rugby Strength Coach Agility and Grapple template. Firstly, I'd just like to thank you for picking up a copy of this template and for your support of the site. And I hope this video walkthrough is useful to you in your implementation of the template. If, however, you still have some queries or questions that remain unanswered, all you have to do is click the link at the bottom of every page of this template and you'll be able to send us an email and we'll get right back to you with an answer to that question. So let's begin with the overview of the agility portion of this template, because that is actually relatively easy to understand and implement. And it basically boils down to this. When you're in attack in rugby, you are trying to create uncontested scoring opportunities and convert those into points. The reason that you want uncontested opportunities is obviously it's a lot easier to execute the skills of the game successfully and score points when you don't have an opponent in front of you trying to stop you doing that and dispossess you of the ball. So fundamentally, we're going to use a combination of tactics and technical skills, which would come under this template, to create separation between attacker and defender in attack. Obviously, in defense, you're trying to stop that happening. So your goal is actually to shut down space in defense using various movement patterns to stay close to attackers, to ultimately stop them creating uncontested scoring opportunities and to dispossess them of the ball so that your team then gets the opportunity to attack. And inherent in all skills in rugby is this idea of keeping your options open and hiding your intent. So it's very, very easy to defend against someone where you know what they're going to do and they don't have the option to change their mind. Bearing that in mind, in attack, you need to adopt body positions and approaches to solving movement problems where you have the ability to keep your options open. That means if you attempt an initial solution to that problem and the defender picks up on it, you can quickly then adjust your approach and capitalize on the weakness that they've then left themselves open to in the response to your first attack. Conversely, in defense, again, you're trying to do the opposite. If we talk about hiding your intent in defense, when you're in the defensive line, the second the shoulders start to turn, you've given away your intent to the attacker, and the attacker is obviously going to turn to attack the space of the weak shoulder. Whereas if, for example, you stay square, you've hidden your intent, and you've also given yourself a much better position to have options from to react to the attacker, to go left, to go right, or to go straight ahead. So what you need to keep in your mind when you implement this template, especially in the decision-making phase, is that you need to hide your intent and misdirect and keep your options open so that you can react quickly to the environment that's unfolding in front of you. And primarily, you're going to do this via two different general movement patterns. One is the inside edge of the foot and one is the outside edge of the foot. And we'll talk about which each of these situations lend themselves to. But throughout this template, you're going to work through a three-phase progression, that being closed, general reactive, and then decision-making. And the purpose of the closed phase is to ingrain those good movement habits to get into safe and effective joint positions and practice producing force and speed in those positions, preparing the tissues, and building work capacity. Once you start to get into the general reactive phase, you are then starting to take those same movement patterns and start to put them under cognitive stress, i.e. Responding to an external cue or an external opponent. And when you start to do that, typically what you're going to see is that the force and speeds go up and the body positions can tend to get a little bit more sloppy. And obviously that's not even close to the situation that you're going to find yourself under fatigue in a highly taxing environment like a game. So it makes sense that we put that in the middle and we're trying to bridge towards that extreme environment of the game itself. Which brings us to phase 3, decision making. So now it isn't a simple drill like phase 2 where you know that there is one outcome or two outcomes and all you have to do is just time your reaction as quickly as possible. When it comes to decision making and you're working against a live opponent, what you're having to do is to go through this OODA loop that we see here: observe, orient, decide, act. So you're having to perceive the movement of an opposing player, You are having to orient yourself, and that means to process information, to try and infer the intent of your opponent, and to look back on your own experiences, your database, your understanding of the game, to try and calculate what is going to be the most appropriate response to the situation and how should you execute that in response to the situation that you find in front of you. You're then going to select that response, and then you have to execute it at high speed with high efficiency in safe joint positions if you want to be the most effective and the most robust you can be on the field. So that is going to be the 3-phase progression for the agility portion of this template. What you're going to see a lot in agility is this triangle position. You're actually going to see it in the Grapple template as well, but basically triangles give you great stability and optionality in attack and defense. So if you look at this leg position I have here in one of the drills attacking TK, you can see I've got this triangle shape. My hips are inside my knees are inside my feet, and I'm pushing off the inside edge of my foot. Note that my knees are not caved in. I still have that hip, knee, and ankle stacked on top of one another, so it's still a safe joint position, even though it is giving me the option to go left and it's giving me the option to go right. As a rule of thumb, look at the angles of the shins. The shins are going to tell you where the force is going, and whichever way the shins are pointing, or pointing into the ground, you are going to go the opposite way. So here you can see when I have that triangle shape, I can go left, I can go right. So I'm approaching TK at the trash cans, and I'm waiting for him to try and commit to one side or the other so that I can quickly react, select the option that is going to equip me with the greatest chance of success, and then execute it. Now, of course, TK here is doing a good job of doing exactly the same thing with that triangle position in defense, because he doesn't want to commit one way or the other until I've done it. So he is hiding his intent, and he's waiting for me to try and execute a solution to that movement-based problem, and then he's going to react. So you can see this triangle position on the inside edge of the foot works well in attack and in defense. And in reality, all these different drills for the inside edge of the foot, all you're going to see is that applied at different angles in different scenarios. And when we talk about the outside edge of the foot, there's no one situation where it's exclusively inside edge of the foot or exclusively outside edge of the foot. As you'll see in the crossover stuff, it typically tends to be one action on one foot, one action on the other foot. But for the sake of simplicity, we've divided into 2 different categories of drills here. But when you look at outside edge of the foot, it tends to be much more of a commitment because you don't have another foot on the other side underneath you ready to push back the other way. So the outside edge of the foot tends to lend itself much more towards turning and running, or high speed, or when you've made a firm commitment to go in a particular direction or try to execute a particular solution to a movement-based problem. So when you're not doing triangles, you're going to be doing outside edge of the foot crossover type patterns. So in phase 1, all the drills are going to be executed extensively, i.e. with rhythm, relaxation, coordination, concentrating on getting into good, safe, effective joint positions and building work capacity through the tissues. And in this example of the 45-degree cut, you can see that I am pushing through the inside edge of my foot. My hip, knee, and ankle are stacked over one another. My shins are lateral, so I'm producing lateral force. That's going to help me create separation in attack or cover in defense. I'm keeping my torso relatively still. In this continuous crossover run version, you can see that now I shift my weight to the outside edge of my foot, drive my leg into the ground, punch my knee across the body to create this kind of symmetrical shin angles with my ground leg and my swing leg, keeping my torso relatively square, because in defense, this is basically simulating a cover defense. That would mean I would turn my shoulders, giving away my intent to the attacker, giving up my inside shoulder to attack 2. And each time I'm just repositioning, getting into that same outside edge crossover mechanics. As we start to get into phase 2, we're going to start to put these patterns under stress. So Not full-blown decision making yet, but what I'm going to have to do is start to react to an external stimulus, which means that my focus is going to go from internal, that is the skill only, to external, in part reacting to an environmental stimulus, in this format, a partner or a partner signal. So in this first example of the reactive crossover run, I'm using that same crossover run pattern from phase one, but now I'm having to react to TK. He's going to indicate left or right. I'm either going to turn to the right and keep running, or I'm going to cut back to the left. So this would be a good example of covering across an defensive line, trying to cover a lot of space quickly that we can't use shuffle mechanics, but suddenly the attacker decides to cut back in to the inside shoulder. I'm going to have to switch quickly from that crossover run into an inside edge cut stop and transition back to a crossover on the other side, as done in this video. So you can see outside edge, outside edge. I switch to inside edge when TK indicates to my left, his right, and then it's back to outside edge of the foot, drive the leg into the floor, punch the knee across, and then finish up. Inside edge, you can see what I'm doing here is trying to keep that triangle shape, keep the width. Two reasons for this is if I'm in a real game and I'm the defender, when I go feet together, that makes me extremely easy to knock over. It also makes me extremely slow to react. That is because when the feet are together, the shins go up and down. That means the force goes up and down. That means you're pretty much going to go up and down. You're not going to go left and right. It's not until you get these lateral shin angles, hips inside knees, knees inside feet, that you put yourself in the joint positions to produce the kind of displacement that helps you track in defense or create separation in attack. So you can see hopefully here, I'm still inside edge, never too wide, never too narrow. TK can afford to get a little bit closer because he's effectively driving the drill as the attacker, that in defense, I obviously want that option to react to what's going on here. Once we get to phase three, we are now applying those same inside edge, outside edge patterns in game realistic scenarios. So it's not just as simple as I know what the movement pattern is going to be. I know what the potential outcomes are. For example, cut left, cut right, turn and run, or track back. Now, what I'm having to do is secure a successful outcome in response to environmental stimuli, where I am in the field, strengths, weaknesses, my personal preferences. We'll show here against TK. You can see that I'm perceiving his motion, what his intent may be, processing it to decide what my best response is going to be, selecting and then executing. So there's no predetermined outcome, there's no predetermined response or predetermined timing. So obviously from a cognitive perspective, this is a much more difficult task to accomplish successfully. And when you're doing it at high speed, high force, high fatigue, that is when the riskier joint positions start to come in. This is why sport practice tends to be the biggest source of injury of everything. And this is why we've put this as phase three of the guide. And you can see here in this corner attack defense, TK can go left, he can go right. He can try and beat me with speed, or he can try and beat me with evasiveness and cut back to the left using his right foot inside edge. And you can see that I'm trying to pick up on that in defense. So start to get these choppy steps coming in, triangle, inside edge, and just tap off the simulator tackle there. That is the agility portion of this guide. So in the grapple portion of this template, it's going to be a little bit more complex. And that is because, to me, agility is actually quite instinctive, in that you know it sucks to run directly at somebody, and it's a lot easier to execute game skills when you're in space. And you know that to create space, you have to be where the other guy is not. When it comes to the grapple stuff, it tends to be a lot more tactically demanding, because you have to think about so many different things at once. So for example, where your feet are, where your hands are, where your shoulders are, which skill it is you're trying to execute, and you're having to process the intent of your opponent, all those different things. And then you're having to respond to their response and start to chain different solutions together to try and achieve a successful outcome. So we're going to go into a little bit more depth in the grapple section, particularly in talking about which each pattern lends itself to in the field. But going into the principles, It sounds obvious, but what you have to think about with the grapple stuff is you're always trying to operate from a position of strength and try to exploit weakness in your opponent. So for each body position that you find on the field, there's going to be a strong position, there's going to be a strong action that they can do, and within that position there is going to be weak positions or weak planes of motion or weak joints or weak actions that they can't do well. And when you're in attack, you need to operate from where you're strongest into where the other guy is weakest, and vice versa when you're the opponent. So when we talk about grappling, what we're basically trying to do is to put a resisting human being where they don't want to be. So that can mean take them down, and it can mean hold them up. But that's basically it. Ideally, in a ruck, you want to do it legally, but the person who is least effective in a ruck is the person on the floor who can't push anyone else. So even in a ruck, we're still trying to take people down. So we're trying to take them down, and we're trying to keep them up. And when we talk about taking people down, if we think again about triangle shapes, one of the strongest shapes in nature is this pyramid shape that you see right here in wrestling. So hips inside knees, knees inside feet, a low center of gravity, a wide base of support, being heavy, either anthropometrically or just in your body position. When you get into a pyramid type shape, that is a stable shape. So it makes sense that when you are trying to take somebody down, you are trying to do the opposite, i.e. narrow their base of support, raise their center of gravity, and tip the center of gravity outside of the base of support. And this is exactly what you see in this example on the right of the freestyle wrestler. So he's taken away the base of support by lifting up one leg, he's raised the center of gravity, and he is either going to drive his opponent over the opponent's left leg to push that center of mass outside the base of support, or he's going to drag using the opponent's right leg to basically drag him into the hole where his right foot used to be. Now, obviously, this is not legal in rugby because of the laws of the game in protecting opponents, but the principles are the same. We can apply the same principles within the context of the laws of rugby to achieve highly successful outcomes with the minimum of effort and energy. And I would always say that is going to be the most productive way to do it in rugby, because it means orthopedically you're going to be a lot healthier, and it means from an energy expenditure standpoint that your efforts are going to be a lot more repeatable and sustainable throughout the game. Conversely, when you are trying to execute a choke tackle, you're actively trying to stop somebody from going down. So you'll see in the choke tackle, you're trying to do the very opposite of that. You're trying to increase the stability of the system. So that is, you are going to widen the base of support, lower the center of gravity, and you can't increase the mass. So it's basically those two things. We'll talk about the little bits of nuance in each of these contact situations with regard to rugby. But again, the principle is the same. Effective grappling within rugby requires you to observe what is happening around you, i.e. the movement of your opponent's body positions, how they are oriented on the field. You're then trying to process that to pick up, hey, what's going on here? What situation do I see in front of me? And we'll talk about what the different categories are. You then need to be able to quickly draw upon a rehearsed pattern or solution, and you need to think about how you're going to execute it based on your position in the field, where you're strong, where you're weak, and then you need to execute that quickly. And you actually need to do it quicker than the other guy, because as soon as your opponent picks up what you're trying to do, they're going to react, and then you're going to be forced to reset that loop, what's called an OODA loop, and go through it all over again. So more than anything, when you go through this OODA loop of observation, orientation, decision, and action, you have to do it very, very quickly. And then once you've decided on your response, you have to execute it with force and speed and intent to achieve a successful outcome and make sure that you win the contest there and then, that you're not constantly going through this loop. One thing that we're trying to do with this template is to build robustness in the key areas of the neck, the shoulders, and the knees. These are the three areas that tend to be most at risk in contact, and you need to be able to manage body segments and maintain postures under high force and speed and chaos in a game in order to be healthy. So one feature that you're going to see in this template is you're getting into joint positions that you're not going to see in the gym, but you are going to see on the field. And obviously there's a gap there. If you're training positions in the gym, you're going to be strong in those on the field. But if you're not training them in the gym and you have to be put into those positions in the field and suddenly produce force and respond to a chaotic load, that is probably where you're going to have risk. So what we're trying to do is water down those joint positions, those extreme ranges of motion, and start to expose you to those in grapple situations, and start to build force and tissue capacity so that you can handle stronger versions of those on the field. And we're also trying to put you in watered down tactical, technical situations so that you are able to get into safe joint positions quickly and effectively under low demand situations to boost your chances of doing so under the bright lights of a game. Because obviously if it looks like shit at slow speed, under low stress, low chaos, low decision making, it is not going to look much better at all on the field of play. And once you start to get into sloppy joint positions, you start to try and execute ineffective movement solutions, that is when people start to get hurt, for example, putting your head in a wrong position, or that is when people start to revert to type and just try and solve problems with more force and more aggression. No question there is a place for that, and you're going to have to use that in a game, but you always want to use the minimum of force and aggression to achieve the same tactical outcome in the game. We're going to make distinctions here between level 1, level 2, and level 3 body positions in both the tackle and the ruck. And we're also going to consider snap downs within the tackle too, because there are going to be rare occasions where you can't use a level 1, 2, 3 simply because your opponent has other ideas or you're late to that contact area. So we'll talk about that. But the 3 basic phases that you're going to go through in this grapple template are firstly the control of self. When you talk about controlling and manipulating a resisting human being to be where they don't want to be, you are talking about controlling their body and yours at the same time. So it makes sense that if you cannot control your body first without any additional load, without any other considerations, you have not earned the right to control somebody else's thereafter. So in phase 1, you're going to go through all of these different awkward joint positions that you might not have been exposed to in the gym or on the field, and you're going to start to produce force and develop control and prepare the tissues in these different planes of motion, these different joint positions, these ranges of motion. When you get to phase 2, that is when you're going to start to expose your body to awkward loads. I don't need to tell you that there is a massive difference between 80 kilos of barbell load and 80 kilos of wriggling, resisting human being. One is a lot harder to produce force and be strong and robust against than the other. So what we're going to do again is start to water down those competition demands and start to expose you to producing force in the same patterns, planes, ranges of motion that you've seen in phase 1, but now with the addition of a partner and an awkward load. We're also going to start to introduce competition in the form of general grapple combat games that are going to teach you through success and failure and the different constraints that are placed upon you within these drills, what is going to be a successful solution and what is going to be an unsuccessful solution. So you're going to discover through competition and success and failure what is a good grapple skill to execute. Then in phase 3, we're going to start to directly apply those grapple skills to the situations that we talked about, the level 1, 2, 3, tackle and ruck, plus the snap down. And we'll talk about the factors that go into this. So phase 1, control of self. You're going to see a variety of different crawling patterns, calisthenics, just different bodyweight exercises that will be planes of motion, ranges of motion, different patterns that you've not seen in the gym that you're going to have to be able to manage high levels of force, speed, and chaos within game contact situations. We're just going to do this in a watered down variety. So you can see here, we have the seal drag. Certainly, you're not going to get into a pattern like this in the weight room. You're not going to get into joint positions like that in the weight room. And with this work, you're just trying to get it through at a decent clip so that it effectively doubles as kind of grapple specific conditioning work, but nothing crazy, nothing maximal. Again, we're trying to lay the foundation, earn the right to do the sexy stuff down the line. And again, you can see here, I'm coordinating my body segments in a way that you're not going to see in the weight room. So I'm creating rotation. I'm having to stabilize through my shoulder. This is just the general format of phase 1 control of self exercises in grappling. When we start to add in awkward loads, you have more of the same from phase 1. So we start to get into a little bit more ISOs, dynamic stuff with the neck. And then the two main pieces of this is the combative tempo and the combative games. When it comes to the combative tempo exercises, these are not competitive. All you're trying to do is take a pre-programmed skill like we did in the agility, and then you're going to start to have to react a little bit to stress that pattern a little bit with external focus of attention and reacting a little bit to a live opponent. So you can see here with the leg drive version, again, as with agility, the shins are going to tell you where you're going to go. So for example, if I want to drive back an opponent in a level 2 tackle, which we'll talk about, I want my shins to point forward so that I'm pushing back into the floor. The shins are going to tell you where you're going to go. My shins point forward, I'm pushing back through the floor, and I'm staying connected to TK with my shoulder and my ear, not wrapping too hard right now, and we'll talk about why that is in the level 2. TK is going to do the same to me. Okay, so this is one example of the combative exercises, and you'll see in the combative tempo exercises, the intensity of execution and the rhythm and the coordination and relaxation that we talked about in phase 1 of the agility. Same idea, just applied to grappling. When we get to the combative games, we're not necessarily looking at game-specific scenarios. What we're looking to do is increase the force, increase the speed, increase the cognitive stress, because now you're having to react to an opponent to try and achieve a successful outcome, which in this double under drill, we're taking the pummel from the combative tempo, and what we're trying to do is get 2 underhooks. So a double under, link the hands together, squeeze the opponent, and lift up. And this is going to teach you through success and failure that you need to keep your elbows close to your body, you need to keep your hands up, and you need a really good clamp on that underhook side to keep your opponent tight to you, and a clamp with your overhook side to stop them doing the same to you. And you can see here, we're fighting to try and get these double unders, also paying attention to footwork. So we both know that if the feet come together and the center of gravity rises up, like we talked about in the example of the triangles, you're going to be in a weak position, and that makes you very easy to beat. So you can see the footwork here is adjusting to maintain that strong base of support and a lower center of gravity. And again, the shin angles are pushing into the opponent to try and maintain dominance in that body position. Didn't need any coaching on this. The drill did it for me. Okay, so this is one example of a general grapple or combative game. Now we're going to go into level 3, which is the application of these different contact skills that you've developed in phase 1 and phase 2. So level 1 tackle is basically any tackle where you're going to make contact, as in the video, with the knees. Okay, so generally when there's a big mismatch between ball carrier and defender, the ball carrier is going to have a ton of momentum. So you can't just try and hit them as hard as possible to slow down their momentum and take them down, because it's just the laws of physics. You're really going to struggle with that. So rather, what you're going to do is let the opponent take themselves down with their own momentum by taking away their base of support. And to do that, the feet have to come together, the knees have to come together. So you're actually going to make contact at the knee or just above the knee for reasons of pain. You're making contact, and the first thing you're going to do once you've made contact with that near side knee is clamp down on the other knee. Okay, you can see my toes still in contact with the floor, still driving back through the floor to drive into my opponent. But once those knees start to come together is when I can turn the corner and start to drive back. And turn the corner is something that you're going to see again and again in this template. And that just basically means to take the opponent offline. So obviously, when you are running in a straight line, you have the most amount of momentum and the most amount of strength pushing back through the floor to run forwards. That means that you are going to be weak moving sideways, especially when your feet are together like this and you can't put a foot out to catch yourself being driven sideways. So you're going to connect just above the knee, wrap up the side knee, feet through the floor, turn the corner, take them offline, drive to finish with a tight clamp. So I'm clamping with my arms, clamping my neck, ear to TK's thigh. Now, of course, if you see this example and you say, hang on, they're not going full intensity, there's two reasons for that. One is that I'm friends with TK and we had to do a lot of these drills, so I didn't want to unnecessarily hurt him and vice versa. The second is that obviously when you go at full intensity, you're going to see a lot of the typical technical errors start to come out under intense stress. So we're going to lower the stress and make every rep effective to ingrain good habits so that we can earn the right to use intensity, force, speed, decision-making down the line. So as you work through the circuits in this template, as you work through the phases, the weeks, and you start to get more confident, you can increase the force and increase the speed and increase the degree of misdirection or reactivity on the part of the attacker and the defender respectively to progress these drills closer to game scenarios. However, I would suggest that you start out at this intensity and in this environment to really nail down these fundamentals. So that is a level 1 tackle. Level 2 tackle is going to be what most people would consider to be a traditional rugby tackle. That is where you are making contact with the ball carrier somewhere between the knees and the hips or the waist. Okay, again, TK is a big guy. He's being kind here, but he's going to try and run me over in a game, and that means that he is going to be strong. Okay, he's going to be strong in a straight line moving back and forwards. So I'm going to connect with my shoulder, and then you can see my right hand is going to reach for his knee. Knees are great for extending and flexing, and they are great in straight lines. But an ACL tear is going to tell you that knees are not good at producing force rotationally or laterally. So again, what I'm going to do is create leverage. I'm creating leverage by hitting him with my shoulder on his right-hand side, my left, and I'm hitting him, caving in his knee with my right hand on the other side. So not only are we creating rotation to put his knee into a weak position, but I'm also creating leverage, something high, something low, and I'm still driving through. You see these shin angles, driving into my opponent. Then I'm going to hook, lift the remaining leg, turn the corner, and drive TK to the floor. You can see it on the other side. So it's going to be connect, wrap around that left knee, clamp, cave it in, lift the spare leg, drive to the floor. As we move on to a level 3 tackle, this is where the distinction is made. So in a level 1, level 2 tackle, the objective is to take down the opponent. In the level 3 tackle, that's basically interchangeable with the term choke tackle that's been popularized, especially by Ireland and Wales over the last 10 years or so of the game. Now you know the objective of this choke tackle is to stop the opponent from going down to the floor, to turn it into a maul, to either strip the ball or to hold things up, to basically get a scrum turnover, or if it goes to the floor, to hold it up. So again, it becomes a scrum turnover. So the goal here is not to take the opponent down, but to keep them up. So we have to flip the takedown principles on their head, and rather than narrow the base of support, you have to widen the base of support. You have to lower the center of gravity and generally make the system more stable rather than less stable. So first thing you're going to do here is connect. So the connection here is not with the shoulder like a traditional tackle. Reason for this is that obviously if I just hit TK and he stood up, he's just going to offload the ball to somebody who can get on the end of it and continue the attack. So the first thing I have to do is connect with my chest to his chest to wrap over the ball and prevent an offload. Now, if I just wrap with that arm, he's either going to keep leg driving and fall to the floor, or he's going to leg drive and break away. So to prevent that happening, what we have to do is wrap with the other arm, and to do that I'm going to have to turn the corner like you see here. So I've got one arm high, one arm low, and that is going to allow me to close the distance and create the connection that facilitates an easier choke tackle. Now, there are some people out there that are so big and so strong that they can just grab another human being with their arms and lift them up. I'm not one of them. TK is much heavier and stronger than me. So in this example, I have to wrap over the ball, then I have to wrap around the hips with my left hand and turn the corner. So you can see here my knees have started to bend, and that is because I'm trying to lower my center of gravity and get my hips underneath TK. From there, I'm going to put my hips underneath, lift him up, and raise his center of gravity. And my left leg, you can just about make it out here, I'm almost creating a shelf for TK to sit on, because I want a physical barrier in the way between him and the floor to make it harder for him to fall down and turn it into a ruck. Now, it's not very realistic with me at 80 kilos and TK at over 90 kilos and as strong as he is with the our respective heights as well, that I'm just going to be able to hold up TK and stop him doing whatever he wants to do. What I'm just trying to do is delay TK enough that I can wait for my supporting players to come in and assist with that effort of keeping him off the floor. And you can see what I'm doing is, as I'm turning and wrapping and getting underneath, I am stopping him from turning to recycle the ball to his teammates. So again, it's that chest-to-chest connection, wrap over the ball to prevent the offload, around, grab the hip with the other hand, hips start to get underneath, we're closing that space, creating connection, little shelf, and wait for the cavalry to arrive. That is the choke tackle. Now, the snap down tackle is going to occur when a couple of things have happened. One is that you have an attacker who has chosen to make the target very, very small by lowering their shoulder and really lifting their knees up and not really giving you an opening to make a good connection for a level 1, level 2, level 3 tackle. Another occasion maybe is where you've put yourself in a bad position, you're quite tall, and you don't physically have the time to lower your center of gravity, think about getting a good connection with good shin angles, and you effectively have a ball carrier driving at your hips and your waist. So when this happens, what you have to do is take away your own base of support and add weight to the entire system. So you're going to attach yourself to that ball carrier, add weight to the entire system, and then basically tip them over and drag them into the hole that you've created with your feet. So here TK is getting into, for the purposes of this drill, an artificially low position. So now I'm going to clamp my chest to TK's back. He's going to continue his leg drive, and what I'm going to do is make a hole. So I'm walking my feet back. If possible, I can still stop his momentum by pushing through the inside edge of my foot. There's that triangle shape again, but obviously he's going to continue to leg drive and try and find the floor to recycle the ball quickly. So I'm going to take those choppy steps backwards, and I'm going to add as much of my weight as possible by sticking my hips and my chest to his back. So he's taking all of my weight, and then I'm going to pop up, show that I'm not touching him, and then if you want to jackal, you can jackal. If they have supporting players, you're then going to end up counter-rocking. But for the purposes of the snap down, the tackle is complete. So once again, he's got a low position. I'm going to make that connection with my chest, then my hips, walking backwards, taking away my base of support with this wide leg position, giving him all my weight, popping up, and then the snap down is complete. Moving on to rucks. So similar distinction classification as the tackles. Level 1, level 2, level 3, 1 being the lowest, 2 being medium, and 3 being high. However, the body position in a ruck is going to be determined primarily according to how early or late your opponent is to that ruck contest. So the first person to the ruck, until they have an opponent, it's not actually a ruck, and they can jackal as TK is doing here on the left. So when an opponent is super early relative to your arrival to that ruck, they're already going to be in a jackal position. And if you remember that triangle, the jackal position is kind of a triangle from all different angles. So he has his hips inside his knees inside his feet, his legs are super wide. His hands are putting weight through the ball. He's pretending that it's not to the referee, but obviously a good jackler is going to put a lot of weight onto that ball so that acts as another base of support, with his feet behind him, his hands on the ball, and his butt in the air. Now, his head is below his hips. That is the distinction of a level 1 ruck. Now, a bad way to approach this scenario is to just bury your head, try and get your head underneath his, and drive your legs like crazy, or just try and hit him off the ball. The reason the jackal is so effective is because it's basically impervious to people hitting you as hard as possible, because either they knock you back into your feet and you just push in opposition to that and then they slide off the top of you, or they try and alligator roll you to the left or to the right, and because your legs are so wide, you can just push in opposition to that whilst the other guy flops. So you can't physically get low enough to get into a good leg drive position. If you hit high, you're just going to glance off, and if you try and roll, their legs are in too good of a position to stop you. However, the weak position within a jackal, a level 1 ruck, like the level 2 tackle, is the knees. The knees do not like to be caved in. The weak point of the knee by driving that knee into the midline, in this example with my left hand. So you're going to create weakness in that knee on the left-hand side, and that is going to be the low point of the leverage. I'm going to then hook with my right hand around TK's hip to create leverage from the top side. So now we have something high, something low, and I'm going to drive into TK, and I'm going to use my momentum to drive off my left leg to create rotational force to flip him over and off the ball. Because if he's strong laterally, if he's strong linearly, I have to put him into a position where I'm creating rotational force. And you can see that is what's happening right here. So I'm approaching through the gate. My left hand reaches, pushes in his knee to the midline. You can see that knee start to cave in. This is really not a nice position to be in for the jackler. I'm driving, and then I'm taking all my weight and hooking with my right hand to create that rotational force. And you can see TK's butt goes in the air. His center of gravity is raised. The feet start to come in, so the base of support starts to narrow, and then the system fails. Okay, I'm just going to roll through to the finish. That is the level 1 ruck. Now in a level 2 ruck, obviously TK, if he gets first to the ruck, he's going to be in a jackal position. Level 2 is where the hips and the head are basically level. We're effectively arriving at the ruck at the same time, but TK is still in a low position. If you were to look head on here at this example on the right hand side, you can see that TK is not providing a really big target for me to connect with my shoulder, to clamp down and then start to leg drive. And if I can't get my shoulder to his chest and lower my center of gravity to be able to drive into the floor, to lift him up, to raise his center of gravity, to take him down, what I'm going to have to do is borrow from wrestling and create an underhook. Okay, so I'm going to create an underhook. My left hand reaches underneath and hooks like we did in the pommel, in the double under drill. So I'm going to reach up into his armpit and get a good underhook. Then what I'm going to do is lift that up and twist TK, his left shoulder down to the floor, his right shoulder up using my underhook, and I'm going to continue to drive him up and back. So spines are weakest in rotation. They're really strong up and down. They're really strong left to right. They're weakest in rotation. So I'm going to create rotation and push TK in a position that he doesn't want to be in. And again, I've got those choppy steps. My shins are pointing forwards. Naturally, you're going to turn the corner here and again put him in a position that he doesn't want to be in and drive him off the ball. So we'll go through this again. Now you can see on the right-hand side, I'm going to hook under his armpit. I'm going to push down. If I can get an overhook on the left-hand side, I'm going to lift up with that underhook, twist, push, take him offline. Finishing up with the level 3 ruck. This is where the opponent is late to the ruck. So you're going to see here that he presents me with a much bigger target to create that connection. So of the 3 ruck varieties, this is closest to a tackle. You just have slightly different options available relative to a tackle because the speed of entry doesn't tend to be as high with the opponent coming to the ruck, nor do you have the momentum coming into a tackle. You can't just clamp and leg drive. What you can do though is you can grab a single leg in wrestling and raise that center of gravity to take away the base of support and put it on one foot, raise up the center of gravity, which makes it a lot easier to change the angle, turn the corner, and leg drive to finish. And you don't have to be nearly as careful taking an opposing player at the ruck to the floor than you do with a ball carrier in a tackle. So as you can see, his body position is a lot more upright here. So it's kind of contrived in this drill, but he's late getting to the ruck. So exactly the same as a tackle. I'm going to choppy steps, lower my center of gravity, and I'm going to connect. What I'm going to do is, again, if I can, cave in his left knee, but really I'm interested in that spare leg, and you can see between his legs, my left arm wraps around and I'm clamping nice and tight. I'm then going to lift his spare leg, choppy steps, turn the corner, and drive him away from the ruck. If we go to the other side, you can see another angle. Late to the ruck, connect, coming through the gate. Right hand grabs the leg, raise the center of gravity, turn the corner, and this is the best finish of all because a guy that's on the floor can't counter ruck. So as I said, with all of these drills, make sure that you get the fundamentals correct first. You ingrain good habits. You get your reps with low intensity, low impact, low reactivity to the attacker or the opponent. As you increase your mastery of these drills, you're going to speed them up. You're going to go a little bit harder, but not from bigger distance away, just with more intent. And you're going to increase the reactivity, the degree of misdirection that your opponent is going to bring to the table. And then you have to be able to quickly pick up on the intent of your opponent, process that information. Is it a level 1? Is it a level 2? Is it a level 3? Which side do I have to go to? What is the objective of the drill that I'm trying to achieve? And then you're going to increase the context, the realism of that drill as you progress through the sets, as you progress through the phases, and as you get closer to real rugby, the business end of pre-season, friendly games, and then into the season.